This seminar is about the diasporic spaces. I thought of speaking about the diaspora philanthropy in Punjab, which is one of the defining aspects of Punjabi diaspora involvement with homeland, as one could actually see this diasporic space. To begin with the larger significance of this work, as many of us know, post-Nation scholarly literature in English in general celebrate migrant diasporic transnationalism for its overtly positive positioning as a field despite and beyond the nation states. And hereby, transnationalism is seen as a process involved in the cross-border ways of migrant and transborderic life. The practices and identities of transmigrants are deemed to be counter-narratives to nations with a potential of unsettling the totalizing national boundaries. Also, there is a distinction made between transnationalism from above and transnationalism from below. Transnationalism from below as a field created and maintained by participating people, in particular, has been appreciated for exceeding the imposing and restricting structures of the nation-state system as a result of their bifocality, if not multifocality, of these transnational citizens, with, of course, its own oppositional and subversive possibilities to the nation-state system as such. Migrant and diasporic transnationalism as a social field is often seen as a site of dense nostalgia, love for the homeland, intense networks that crisscrosses the world into innumerable micro-territorialities, as against, of course, the territoriality at large, as represented by the nation-state. So as a result, if you look at the migration studies during the last 2-3 decades, it has actually taken a big turn from the paradigms of disjunctures, paradigms of discontinuities, to paradigms of connectedness, continuities, and reinventions. And of course, there are visible examples coming from diverse diasporic locations of this intense connection and exchanges between the homeland and the diaspora. Now, having said that, what I'm going to do today is to problematize this sort of a narrative. The questions that obviously comes to my mind is, does these celebrations of supranational connectedness and social fields of nostalgia overlooks some of the prevailing tensions of diasporic transnationalism? Would the migrant transnational connections be essentially monophonic and demotic? Also, there is this question, is it a kind of one-to-one direct connection which is unmediated by none? And also, does it privilege the homeland ties over the other multifarious priorities and considerations of the diaspora? So obviously, by raising these sort of questions, which perhaps will complicate a simplistic way of painting migrants as essentially forthcoming as eternal benefactors to home, and home as obviously undeviatingly convivial, a treasure house of infinite benevolence and warmth, etc., would be complicated in this process. So the attempt that I'm going to make today is to look at diaspora philanthropy, as I indicated already in Punjab, to foreground diasporic transnationalism as a field of diverse interests, and also a field involves diverse players and diverse signifiers. And specifically, I'm going to do 3 things. The first thing is I'm going to look at this issue of how the state, particularly the subnational state, is implicated in the homeland ties of Punjabi diaspora. Specifically, what is the role that state and the political agency of that state in formalizing largely the informal transnational transactions, through new institutions and new discourses, is the first question that I'm going to discuss. Second aspect of my presentation is going to be asking this question: how far diaspora is singular in their orientation towards philanthropy and also aspirations for their homeland, the future of the homeland, right? And also the third aspect of my presentation would be looking at the role of the local in diaspora philanthropic endeavors. Is the diasporic enthusiasm also over time is waning, confronting the actualities of consumption, and apart from raising the questions of sustainability. Now, looking at the history of Punjabi diaspora, and which was obviously actualized by sustained migration, Punjabi is, of course, as many of us know, is seen as a highly out-migratory state with an inherent migratory proclivity. There are attempts to trace this back to the 19th century and perhaps even back, because Punjab is seen as located in the invasion route into India. So as a result, people were made to leave often their homes and adopt to new locations. So as a result, migration and settlement was very much part of their life. Also, there is attempts to trace this migration history back to the Punjabization of Indian Army, which obviously led many Punjabis to distant locations like North America, East Africa, the Far East, etc. Of course, Punjabi migrants, say for instance, to Britain in the 19th and 20th century were mainly the personal servants of imperial administrators and adventurers. Also, seamen who are working in menial capacities, in particular on British merchant ships, and a number of students also seeking professional qualifications from the universities and education institutions in the UK. Now, the First World War brought a lot of soldiers as well as seamen from Punjab to Britain, who are apparently slipped quietly away to stay back, making use of the local conditions. And by the time of independence, as a result of all this process, if you look at the UK, Punjab-UK connection alone, Britain had a large number of Punjabis already settled in Britain. Now, coming to the post-independent India, of course, during the general economic boom after the Second World War, migrations increased through the networks and channels which are already been established. And of course, Punjab, there was a heightened migration from Punjab, often making some scholars to call it as a process of reverse colonization. Apart from UK, Canada and United States were other major destinations for the migrants from Punjab. To the extent these three locations together accounts for almost 3/4 of the Punjabi immigrants, according to scholars like Darshan Singh Tatla. Obviously, since then, the Doab region was been the nerve center of this migration, and since 1960s, this sustained movement to the western locations has created a situation of a migration fever, also enabled by the new sort of systems and laws established in many of these countries, allowing the families to unite with the single men who initially migrated. So that's sort of broader history of migration and establishment of diaspora, Punjabi diaspora, particularly in the Western world. And as far as their philanthropic interventions are concerned, of course, Doab region is also known for the philanthropic investments by Punjabi diaspora, particularly in the rural Doab region. And such spending, of course, had a long history, but it began to receive the attention of scholars, academic attention, only very recently, perhaps particularly enabled by this new discourse of migration and development, in which migrants and diaspora are viewed as agents of development. Now, by and large, the academic interventions on the Punjabi experience celebrates this private spending on the public good as involved in the philanthropic investments of the Punjabi diaspora. And of course, it has been foregrounded as a testimony of their bifocal living and also the deep connection that the diaspora maintain with the homeland. And this diasporic benevolence has been often invoked as an evidence of the shared culture that Punjabi diaspora retains with the homeland despite being settled abroad, resulting in economic, social, religious, and political linkages between the diaspora and the home. And of course, there are various explanations given for other explanations were also given for this philanthropic activities, that, which includes the social alienation that the diaspora suffers in their host locations, deprival of social citizenship, etc., etc. So scholars like Dusenberry, for instance, look at Sikh diaspora philanthropy also as a practice which is underpinned by religious traditions, urging, say, for instance, the idea of dhan, selfless giving is there, the idea of seva, service to the communities involved in it. Of course, that blends with Punjabi traditions of Sardari, which is patronage, and also the idea of Izzat, which is honor, which involves display of wealth. So it's actually a combination of altruism and self-interest in that sense, which often defines this philanthropic investments and activities of the diaspora. And also, if you look at some of the early literature on diasporic philanthropy, there is a near agreement in this literature that the diaspora investments can potentially contribute to the socio-economic development of Punjab in significant ways. And of course, it's true that the spontaneous and non-planned and largely unorganized contributions in the earlier times is taking some sort of an organized form in recent decades, particularly through the new networks of hometown associations, village associations, the Biradari associations, religious-based organizations, etc., coming into being in the host locations, as well as the village and town welfare associations coming up in home locations, right? So obviously, such contributions started with contributions to religious places, unproductive investments like erecting memorial gates, spending on spectaculars like festivals, sports, etc., etc. But eventually, it began to give ways to investments on human development as well, particularly also investments on village amenities through setting up supportive education institutions, dispensaries, hospitals, crematoriums, sports stadiums, street lighting, sanitation, clean drinking water projects. All these kinds of things have been done by the diaspora in the rural Doab region. And if you ask some of the diasporic citizens who are active in this process, what defines their, or at least what they wanted to project themselves as doing, is that they want to modernize their village, their ancestral village, their pind, and also their shahars, their towns, and making them model villages and towns. That actually stands out in those narratives of contributing diaspora. Right? Now, as I have indicated initially, such celebrations defines their narratives as well as some of the early literature, right? And some of the inherent nuances of such investments are not seriously being looked at, particularly the contestations that are involved in the underbelly of such contributions are not particularly looked at. Say, for instance, look at the politics of such spending, the discontents and anxieties it engenders among the diaspora and the local societies, diverse purposes it serves, and diverse constituencies it addresses, the local participation, anxieties about its sustainability. All such problems were by and large overlooked. Of course, some of the recent literature by Steve Taylor, Walton Roberts, etc., a few others as well, are addressing such issues. And of course, my effort to basically contribute to that set of literature. Now, the first point that I would like to make in this connection is the role of the state in diasporic transnationalism. Though, as I said, transnationalism from below is seen by and large as a people-to-people contact zone, a zone of people's exchange. And in the field of research, transnationalism as a whole is privileging this people-to-people contact across national borders as its focal point, right? Of course, calling researchers on multi-sited lives and global and transnational ethnoscapes. But if you look at the Punjab case, what you can see is there is an active involvement of the Punjab subnational state to interfere with the diasporic philanthropy. Say, for instance, the Punjab government has started this NRI Government of Punjab Rural Infrastructure Development Fund in 2002 with an aim of incentivizing and strengthening such philanthropic flows by the diaspora to their ancestral village. And it was called as Plan Scheme NRI 2, was a result of such an initiative, and it allowed basically 50% of matching grants by the government of Punjab for village development programs that are initiated by the so-called NRIs or the diaspora. And subsequently, the plan was renamed as Plan NRI 1 with a stated intention of enabling and facilitating platform for overseas Punjabi contribution for development of their villages, providing later at that stage at 75% of matching grants by the government of Punjab for all rural as well as urban development programs initiated by NRIs as well as NRI NGOs. Now I understand that 75% matching grants has gone back to 50% of late. And there was this scheme called Mera Pind, Mera Shahar. It was under this particular scheme, the plan scheme NRI was implemented, which sought to ensure full participation of NRIs and NRI NGOs into village infrastructure development activities. And of course, as part of this initiative, the Punjab NRI Committee for Development was constituted in 2005 for promoting and implementing the scheme. And this committee was headed by the Chief Secretary of Punjab. And of course, there is many high officers included in the committee, including principal secretaries, DCs, etc. And also, initially, the variety of things that one could do under this project was limited. Over time, it was actually included not only just hospitals, libraries, drinking water projects, sewerage disposal plants, public latrines, street lights, etc. but also it allowed to include all projects that would be beneficial to the people of all walks of life. Also, this particular scheme ensures the ownership of public property by the respective villages. Village development committees were formed in individual villages wherever this plan was implemented with the help of the diaspora money, equally the government money. So as a result, the village development committees formed in these villages and towns were responsible for the implementation of the project as well as the maintenance of the built infrastructure. Now, there is, of course, there is a clear plan for this, how it is implemented, what are the sanction process involved. I'm not getting into the details of that. But this is something that the government of Punjab has done to channelize and incentivize more and more diasporic philanthropic investments in rural Punjab in particular. And the Department of NRI Affairs, of course, retains its prerogative to check the standards, quality, and the progress of the work. And at different levels of the progress of the work, there are this sort of progress assessment, which is part of the scheme. Now, apart from this, this sort of a plan, as I said, the plan under Mera Pind, Mera Shahar scheme, there are also attempts to maximize overseas Punjabi contribution to philanthropy and village development through providing them the services that the NRIs, the NRPs, as they are called now, are basically looking for, right? Many services specifically aimed at overseas Punjabis to promote and strengthen their bonds with the homeland has been started by the government of Punjab, and some of them includes the NRI police stations, setting up of the Department of NRI Affairs. There is fast-track courts for NRI cases. And also there is government support to this NRI NGO called Nri Sabha, right? Now, NRI police stations initially were just 4, and then it was expanded to 6, and now in Punjab we have around 15 NRI police stations, which are dedicated police stations looking at the NRI cases, right? Particularly their grievances. Now, NRI courts has been set up for speedy settlement of cases, because this was one of the major complaints of the diaspora community, that their cases are unduly dragged. And of course, as I said, in Nri Sabha, the NGO of Punjabis were also given support to help the diaspora to these kinds of things. Now, all these attempts of the state government of Punjab fundamentally rely upon a subnational identity and ethnic solidarity of Punjabis across the world. And the sentimental and emotional affinity of Punjabis with their motherland and their enthusiasm for its progress is invoked and employed for garnering resources for development and keep them deeply attached to the state. And such discourses are produced through various institutions like NRI Sammelans, other sorts of media, public platforms, reach out programs, etc., etc. It is also important to note that it was after the separatist, the Khalistan movement, which was significantly, as many of us know, supported economically and ideologically by the Punjabi diaspora. It became an imperative for the state to discourage diaspora financing for subversive, so-called subversive activities and channelize it productively for the development needs of the state. And this, of course, in turn reinforces a distinct Punjabi cultural identity beyond the territorial confines of the nation, the sub-nation, into a kind of global Punjabi identity. Now, however, launched in 2004, this planned scheme NRI 1 did not make much spectacular progress, as perhaps any other attempts to formalize and governmentalize such private initiatives, which is very clear when often we hear government officials and the Chief Minister himself decrying that NRIs are not interested in investing in Punjab. NRIs are accusing the government that plan did not work at all, but it only dissuaded the NRIs from investing by creating technical difficulties, lengthy approval process, and multiple hurdles on their way. So as a result, many of the NRIs or diaspora who started working on such projects started giving up such projects. There are two important NRI NGOs who are working on this earlier, the Village Life Improvement Foundation and also the Indo-Canadian Village Improvement Trust. And both these NGOs were quite active, and they have actually done quite a lot of projects. But what you see is after 2012, there are not many projects that these NGOs are undertaking, and they have almost withdrawn from the activities because of, as I said, the hurdles that were created on the way. Now, also, that doesn't mean that this plan scheme was not working. Of course, there were some projects still running. As per the latest statistics that I have acquired, which belongs to 2017-18, around a project fund of around 50 crores is being spent on different projects at that point in time in Punjab. But mostly these projects were initiated by the VDCs, the Village Development Committees, right? Who basically form the village development committees and elicit the diaspora's help, and thereby try to actually implement this process. And of course, as I said, this scheme has to get a lot of administrative approvals and sanctions, for which obviously someone located in Punjab and who are part of the village development committees are necessary. So this is the first point that I want to make. Even though it is seen as a people-to-people positive linkage zone, the state is actively involved here. It is trying to formalize such initiatives, and as a result of which, obviously, there are implications for such philanthropic flows into Punjab. Now, the second point that I would like to mention is about the second and third point I would like to mention draws from a village, a specific village in the Doab region, and I call this village as Barapind. Of course, this is a pseudonym. And the first example I'm going to give by using education philanthropy as a case study. Now, if you look at this village, Barapind, some scholars, of course, have already argued that NRI association with homeland has a tinge of specificity, because they actually are focused more on ancestral villages, right? To the extent that they're not even prepared to go to the neighboring villages, right? So that specificity is always there, which made a few scholars to argue that this sort of investments is actually long distance particularism, right? Specificity to particularism. Now, what is also important to consider is not this particularisms, but also how factionalism works in such endeavors. And that is what I'm going to demonstrate through this example of education in the case of this particular village called Barapind, right? And Barapind is located in the south of Jalandhar. As I said, there are quite a lot of education investments by the diaspora in the village, and it is one of the biggest administrative villages in Punjab. It has, of course, now grown into a town's status, largely because of the investments that the diaspora has been making in this ancestral village. And this village assumes importance in Sikh history as a place visited by Guru Arjun Dev, the fifth Guru and the first Sikh Guru who was martyred. And Barapind is also considered as a village of freedom fighters, producing nearly 90 freedom fighters, including the Ghadarite revolutionary Baba Bhagat Singh, who breathed his last in 2009 in England. Baba Bhagat Singh went to Argentina in his youth, became involved in the Ghadar party activities, and was pronounced as the most dangerous revolutionary by the colonial government of India, according to the Ghadar party directory published in 1934. Right? So Barapin's connection with the external world through migration thus dates back to the colonial time, if not earlier. And of course, it is seen as one of the villages in the Doab region of Punjab, which is having the highest number of families with members living abroad. And the accomplishments of the village in diaspora philanthropy are also well known among the Punjabi diaspora across the world. This involves wide range of investments ranging from memorial gates and sports activities to a general hospital, with an approximate investment of around 500 million. And recently, the sons of Baba Bhagat Singh living in the UK have turned his ancestral house in the village into a library and reading room in the memory of his father, housing thousands of books and providing reading facility to the village. Now, the history of participation in the Ghadar movement, progressive thinking as a result of such involvement, commitment to perhaps leftist politics, and the secular orientation has influenced the diaspora efforts and educational philanthropy in Barapind. But interestingly, it was not the Ghadari emigrants who were the first to establish a school or college in the village. Rather, it was a Hindu faction who established the first school through philanthropy in the village. There was this family called Nri family, and they have established a school, which is TDP school, as I call it, which was established in 1995, following the death of Mrs. Rani of the Nri family. Now, Mrs. Rani had a dream of seeing the area developed as a center of education, and her sons, 7 sons, lived abroad, except one. All of them have migrated to England and Canada, and they have contributed to the making of this school. Initially, of course, it was started as a humble initiative. The school was established in a rented house with just 4 rooms in a Gurudwara. But then subsequently, the brothers purchased 2 acres of land at the cost of 15 lakhs at that point in time. That was in 1998, and erected the building, and subsequently it went on expanding. And the interesting fact of this school is that it was affiliated to the Dayanand Anglo Vedic public school system, which is DAV public school system that all of us know, which is having a lot of respect and greater standards claims in public education system, right? Now, the only sibling of Mrs. Rani, only son of Mrs. Rani who stayed back, Mr. Ashok, acted as the local lynch person for the school trust, and explained to me that this was this was not only just a charity gesture, but also they wanted to give the best education possible to the children in the village, and that is the reason why they have affiliated and handed over the school to the DAV public school system. And today, this was 2014 when I visited last time there. They have around 50 teachers with around 1,500 students studying in the school. Now, DAV public school system, as all of us know, is affiliated, is an educational organization based on the ideals of the religious and social reformers, Swami Dayananda Saraswati, and also his Arya Samaj Hindu reform movement. And it has got over 700 schools across India. And of course, that tradition goes back to the late 19th century. Now, this TDP school started like that with the help of, with the funding from this diaspora, had a Hindu religious orientation. The academic sessions, say, for instance, begin with the Haven, which is home ceremony, the Sanskritic ritual of making offerings to into a consecrated fire, right? But at the same time, the school management insists, that the most defining characteristic of their school was the modern secular education that they provide, which is, of course, being testified by the curriculum that they follow. They follow the prestigious Central Board of Secondary Education curriculum. They have well-furnished library, stocked with expensive international textbooks from British publishing houses like Macmillan, Oxford, Cambridge, Longman, etc. They have a well-equipped computing lab, maths and science laboratories, a gymnasium, a music room, a arts room, and so on, right? So their vision of providing a secular, humanist, and moral education, the TDP school, in a sense, represents a pervasive Hindu contextualism, as Sanjay Srivastava has perhaps called it. Now, while the Nri Hindu faction shares the Congress, International Congress leanings, in 1997, a rival school came up in the village in Barapind, which is known as Akal Academy, right? Which was established with the support of Jat Sikh migrants of the village, particularly those affiliated to the Shiromani Akali Dal party and the Sikh ethno-nationalist movement, right? And Mr. Ashok Tandri confessed that Akal Academy has given them a tough competition in the efforts of fundraising, say, for instance, and also he explained that it was the Akal Academy which made them expand the school beyond beyond its modest beginning in a rented house. Their plan was very modest in the beginning, but the competition offered by Akal Academy has made them to expand it. And like DAV school, the Akal Academy is also part of a chain. Today there are 129 Akal Academy across Punjab, Himachal Pradesh, Haryana, and Uttar Pradesh. Akal Academies were established under the authority of Sant Baba Atar Singh Ji and his follower Sant Baba Teja Singh Ji. It is said that Sant Atar Singh was troubled by the efforts of the British rule on the Sikh religion and saw a form of modern reformed Sikh education as a panacea for this ongoing westernization under the British. And his disciple, Sant Teja Singh, who was educated with an LLB and a master's degree, took up the task of fulfilling his vision. And it all started in a village called Baru in Himachal Pradesh as a prophesied site of the establishment of a center of modern religious education. Now, in the Barapind Akal Academy, when I visited last time, there were 58 teachers and over 1,200 students, which imparts education from kindergarten to the +2. And it was somebody called Sardar Dhyan Singh, a prominent Nri from Bilga in Australia, donated the land for this particular academy. 17 acres of land was given, and he mobilized 10 million rupees at that point in time for building the Akal Academy. And of course, the donations from the Jat Sikh diaspora for the cause of Sikhism has allowed the school to have well-equipped composite science, maths, and computer labs, a work experience lab, arts and crafts room, activity room, audiovisual rooms, divinity and musical rooms, playground with basketball, volleyball. Also, there is a Gurudwara Sahib inside the premises of the school. And Akal Academy aims to provide stricter religious instruction than the DAV school. Of course, the children were had to follow the religious modes of dressing with turbans, headdress, etc. And also there is Shabad verse, which is happening during the morning assembly, and the Ardas recited after the mid-morning and lunch breaks. Also, the timetable interposes standard modern subjects with classes in divinity and Sikh history, which were, of course, compulsory for Sikh as well as non-Sikh students alike. Sikh students may additionally opt for kirtan, which is devotional music, as many of you know, and also Santya, which is recitation techniques. Amrit Sanchar, which is the Sikh baptism, are hosted on the site of the Gurudwara. And of course, the principal, Mrs. Kaur, has informed us that there is a free concession for students who have agreed to be baptized. Right? So these two schools in the Barapind and its environment exposes radically two different visions of social reform. Right? And as the principal, Mrs. Kaur, has explained to us, of course, supporting rural education is the prime aim of Agal Academy, but she quickly adds that preserving Sikhism was the prime motive of establishing this school. Though school has a specific mandate of uplifting Sikhism among the youth, she was also very eager to highlight the fact that the faculty and the students of the school include non-Sikhs, and also they provide modern education to the children. Now, of course, she was worried about the difficulty about educating Nri children, particularly because she described them as living with their uneducated grandparents who were not even able to count up to 10. They were taken out of academy every now and then to renew their citizenship in the West. They travel to the West and come back, cutting their hair and having non-vegetarian eating habits, etc. Right? So teachers at the academy have a tough time controlling them. Meanwhile, the principal at the TDP school insisted on the secularist credentials of the school. Unlike the Agal Academy, according to whom, who was interested only in Sikhism, right? Agal Academy, of course, students, whenever they seek admission in the TDP school, the principal informs that no, they are not very keen to take the Agal Academy students because it's very difficult to control them. They are spoiled children with no discipline and inclination for studies. That's what he told me. And the Gadari immigrants, frequently with communist affiliations, are a further philanthropic faction in Barapind. Mr. Prem Singh, a founding life member of the General Hospital that I'm going to speak now, was very categorical that Agal Academy was more religious and being run by Sikh fundamentalists, and it is funded by fanatic Sikhs. Right now, he explained to me one instance in which he engaged in a fight with one of the supporters of this academy. I quote that statement made by him. Last week, I fought with my friend Debi. He was in favor of Agal academies. I said him that you force children to wear religious dress, you force the girls to wear turbans, you are imposing fundamentalism on them. I argued with him. I said, you keep education at the back and you keep religion in the front. They will surely be lagging behind in education. Now, on the other hand, even being a Jat Sikh, Prem Singh was very appreciative about the secularist credentials of the IDP school, which was actually being run by the Hindu faction. Okay, so the last example is about this general hospital located in the same village, which is run by, again, a Diaspora trust, which is known as the Barapind General Hospital, which is opened in 2005. The hospital was constructed by the trust under the leadership of Gyan Singh and Pyara Singh, both of them located in Birmingham, contributing to the maximum. And it had got a 5 acres of a campus. And the original members have contributed around £2,000. And this leaders, Gyan Singh and Pyara Singh, has contributed £10,000 each. And but then, of course, this hospital was also involving significant local intervention. It was, the communist, the great communist belonging to the village, Comrade Kartar Singh, who has donated land for making this hospital. And of course, he actually speaks about a language of commitment to the poor and downtrodden. And it was seen as a hospital for the service of the oppressed classes of the society. And serving the poor and downtrodden was the ideal of this Comrade Kartar Singh. For actualizing his vision, this hospital came with the support of the global Punjabi community, but mostly located in the UK. Now, as I already said, there were considerable local interest in this initiative. It was not only just the donation of land by the Kartar Singh, there were also local members who could actually become part of the life members of the trust by contributing 10,000 rupees each at that point in time when it came up in 2005. Also, the Desh Bhagat Jagaran Committee of the Barapin village annually organize various events for commemorating the patriots and freedom fighters of the village town. And there also they had actually donated and mobilized money for the thing. But the interesting fact one could see is the kind of rift which is happening within the trust, between the local members of the trust as well as the diaspora. And as a result, the local trustee members of the board were disappointed, and they say that their board governors consisting only doctors from Birmingham, and the local people are not really heard. And even within the diaspora, there are differences, right? And what is apparently at the root of the problem is a policy change adopted by the trust in 2010, which was indicated by the medical officer to me at that point in time. He shared his conviction that hospital is on loss at that point in time. Hospital cannot run on long on charity. It has to generate at least the running cost, according to him. And whenever there is an expansion plan, of course, Diasporic fund could be mobilized, right? And the problem was that the hospital was not financially self-sufficient. It was established with the Diasporic resources, but then day-to-day running was a real problem, right? And it has been reported that during the recent visit of mine, it is reported that it is generating a huge amount of loss. So as a result, it needs to generate its own resources. So this sort of a capitalist management principle that angers the socialist bloc in the trust to the extent of dissociating themselves from this. To cut the story short, this sustainability question has forced the trust to finally hand over the hospital to the Ludhiana Christian Medical College, and now it is being operated by the Ludhiana Christian Medical College. And when you ask about the hospital to the other migrants, say for instance, one of my informants, Joginder Singh, the father of another NRI who immigrated to UK illegally, he expresses that they are not even part of such a elite biopolitical network of this Varapint diaspora, right? And he confessed that there is not even much output. The building is very good. People are opening schools there, but there are no teachers. And he also alleges that even for contributing, they select NRIs according to their choice. And of course, there are different wings and layers among NRIs according to him. Now, as a conclusion, a quick conclusion, from the three examples that I have given regarding the state involvement, the factionalism, as well as the sustainability and the philanthropic infrastructures are being handed over for management to prestigious institutions, etc. Actually, perhaps enable us to reconceptualize migrant transnationalism, diasporic transnationalism, with a realistic sense. Diasporic space, as encapsulated in the concept of transnationalism, is just not a field of people-to-people affirmative conduct alone, and driven by nostalgia and unwavering love for the homeland. State is an active player, as I said. I've demonstrated the attempts on the part of the state government to bag its transnational resources through powerful invocation of subnational identity and ethnic solidarity, and to formalize, of course, informal exchanges, often resulting in the breaking down of such philanthropic flows. Moreover, the attributed singularity of diaspora needs to be complicated by its particularities, factionalism, marginalities, ideologies, radically different visions about social reform through education, and historical situatedness, apart from the question of sustainability of philanthropic infrastructure, created particularly because diaspora has undergone a generational change already. I'll stop there. Thank you very much.